Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to the webinar today. We're really excited to have you. We're going to get started in just a minute, but we want to give people time to get on the call first. So, great. I see a couple more people coming in to that chat area. Amazing. Love it. All right, I'll give people another minute. I'm going to count to 30 and then we'll get started. I lied. I'm not actually going to count to 30. Okay, that felt like 30. So my sense of time is maybe slightly warped, but that's all right. Let's get things started. Hi, everybody. My name is Maya. I work for the Maine Aquaculture Innovation Center. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday in February for our MAIC webinar. This is the second webinar of 2025, and we are very excited to be continuing this series this year. If anybody missed a 2024 or 2023 webinar that you'd like to go back and view, we do actually have all of these recorded, and they are available on our YouTube channel and on our website. So definitely check those out. There's some really great content there and lots of learning opportunities. I think the announcements from MAIC right now, I think that there are minimal announcements currently. Just looking forward to Fisherman's Forum next week, and then we'll be looking ahead to Aquaculture America the following week. So we've got some exciting events coming up, but those are kind of bigger conferences, and we may see some of you there. In terms of the webinar today, we're super excited to have with us Alexa McGovern from Dirigo Sea Farm. And Alexa is working on material manufacturing and the use of seaweeds for plastic alternatives. So she's going to talk to us a lot about all of those exciting opportunities for seaweed in the plastic alternative sphere. And Alexa also participated in the Farmer to Farmer Exchange program. Farmer to Farmer Exchange is a program that MAIC supports for farmers to go and visit other locations across the United States and across the world to kind of visit and exchange knowledge and then bring back innovation to the Maine coast. And if you're curious about that program, there's more information on our website. And there is also the ability to just reach out to us at info@maineaquaculture.org, and we can pass on that to you as well. All right, without any further ado, I will pass it on to Alexa. If you want to start sharing your screen and take it away. The only other thing I will mention to our attendees is that you're welcome to ask questions throughout this webinar. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you put questions in there, I will be asking them throughout the webinar. So we'll kind of have a little bit of a conversational feel going on. So definitely, please put your questions there. We're really excited to have questions, and it kind of helps us to get the most information across. All right. Thanks so much, Alexa. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Yeah, you bet. Me too. Yeah, and I'll reiterate, just please feel free to cut me off at any point. I'm happy to dive into anything that's of interest to folks. So yeah, thank you also to your team, Maya and Annie, for sponsoring me to go to Iceland. I had never been before, and so it was a very exciting trip, and I learned so much that I'm going to try to consolidate into this presentation. But like I said, if there's anything that comes up that people want to know more about, if I don't know it, I will find it for you, and I will happily follow up after too. Okay, so the way that I kind of broke out this presentation is I'm going to give you a quick overview of what Dirigo Sea Farm is doing, and then I'm going to jump into the conference and all of the kind of highlights. I would say I went through my notes this week from September when I went, and I tried to pull out what was most impactful for me. The conference was 2 days though, so if you end up going online and looking at the agenda or the speakers and want to know more, I'm happy to grab some more info for you too that I don't hit on today. Okay, so I'm Alexa, like Maya said. I'm the founder of Dirigo Sea Farm. We were founded at the end of 2023, so we're still a very young company, but we are doing a lot of what I think is super cool work. So I'm excited to share it with you today. About 5 years ago, I was on a plane and I read about kelp farming in Maine. And like most people, I got super excited, but I really had no idea how I would get involved. I was really excited about, I know people get excited about the environmental benefits, which I think are amazing, but I was really excited about the economic kind of tool that this could be for Maine and specifically for the fishing industry. And so I was really wanted to get involved but didn't have access to, like, for example, I don't know how to drive a boat. I didn't have a biology degree. I was in software development, so like my background was completely separate from what this world was, but I was really interested. So I kind of told myself, pay attention to this, and if there's a way for you to get involved later down the road, try. And that's what I did. So I watched, Maine become the largest grower of farmed kelp in North America over the past 5 years. And I've just watched it take off and I've been super inspired by that. And then fast forward to last year, it was pretty big for me in a couple different spheres. So I became a mother. So that's my daughter on the screen, Vivian. She's about 20 months old now. So this is a little bit older of a photo, but she was the kind of starting point for this, in that I was starting to do a lot of research, as new moms do, around products and just things that I wanted to kind of nest with to get ready for her arrival. And I was looking at things like glass bottles to try to eliminate her plastic exposure. And then I started reading research around, microplastic being found in things like my placenta and my breast milk. And I was terrified that this supernatural process was being contaminated before she was even earthside. And so that was kind of my first exposure to these like toxins that we're exposed to on a daily basis. And then fast forward, about 8 months later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I was 29 when I was diagnosed. I have no pre-existing condition. I do not have genetic predisposition. I'm a relatively healthy person. I'm obviously kind of not in the right age that people usually associate with breast cancer. And so things like it could be environmentally caused started getting thrown around by my doctors. And I was like, hold on, what does that mean? And what are you talking about? And again, went down another rabbit hole of research around toxicity and what environmental causation means, and kept coming back to microplastics and how ultimately when they engage with your body, they're causing chronic inflammation, which leads to chronic disease. And so I was at this point where I was getting exposed to all of this research around, we're having these toxins presented to our bodies and not really knowing how to do anything about it. And then on the flip side of that, I still was super passionate about this kelp economy that was, becoming a huge deal in Maine, where I'm from, the state I care the most about. And so they were growing so much of it and we're so good at it that we had excess kelp. And so it's not as though we can continue to just say like eat more kelp. We really needed to start thinking about alternative value added products that could be derived from this kelp. And so it was at the same time that I was learning about all of this like plastic research. And so coming together, I thought, can we use all this excess kelp to create a plastic alternative? I'm not the only person that thinks that. There is a lot of research showing that consumers are very aware of environmental problems and health problems related to the products that they use every day. 46% want to buy more sustainable products. 62% of consumers want companies to take a stand on issues that matter to them. And then on the right-hand side, I love this, this image, but basically all of this research I'm referencing is only just at the beginning stages of being understood, right? So this is just a PubMed screenshot, but it's showing the number of microplastic studies that are being done. And all this research might not be showing bad outcomes, but I don't really think any of it's going to be good. And so we're just at the precipice of understanding what this microplastic kind of contamination is doing to us. 20 times more plastic is in brain samples than any other organ. This plastic is breaking the blood-brain barrier. That's something that's never happened before in human history. And so all of these things kind of culminated in me deciding to focus on the laundry pod application because I was doing so much laundry as a new mom, way too much laundry. And I was wondering what happens when I drop these laundry pods into my wash, like what happens, and found out that though polyvinyl alcohol is technically biodegradable, which is what wraps these laundry pods, it's actually not being degraded in our wastewater treatment plants because they are not the right environment to be processing this material. And so we decided to prototype, can we take the Maine kelp that's grown, primarily sugar kelp, refine that kelp, and then turn it into plastic film or bioplastic films that can be used in the same application. So we've prototyped that. We're in pilot stage now. We have vertically integrated manufacturing. What that really just means is we do all of our own biorefining, so extracting what we need from the kelp and then actually creating the film material itself. It's truly biodegradable. It actually loves water so much that it's actually hard to like dip and get moving, but that's a problem for another day. And our waste stream is completely natural. So it's just salt water that we ultimately end up having to return back into the waste stream, which is great and really uncommon in this space. Usually they're using chemicals like formaldehyde and bleach in order to process seaweed, and we're not doing any of that. And then what we're trying to really prioritize in our development is existing system and process compatibility, because it's lovely if you can make a product that replaces plastic, but ultimately if it doesn't plug into existing processes in the manufacturing world, no one's going to adopt it. And so we're trying to really get this right. We have our provisional patent, and then we're ultimately launching a target for end of this year, being able to sell our material to brand manufacturers that would then utilize this for their product development. So that's what we do. This is just a mock-up of what we're ultimately working towards. You guys probably use these laundry pods, and then dish pods would be kind of our next natural evolution. Our lab is based in Portland. We just moved it from Blue Hill. I was telling Annie earlier, we're hoping to get back to the Mid-Coast area, but for now we're based in Portland in the University of Southern Maine Science Building, and we're doing all of our bio refining in-house there, and then all of our film testing there as well. So the second part of what I wanted to talk to you guys about is the Arctic Algae Conference that I went to in September of last year. Again, thank you guys for sending me. I actually was also able to bring my father with me, which was really nice. And he his whole background's in manufacturing, so he helps a lot with kind of developing our biorefining processes. And so we learned so much just by getting to talk to people that this is their whole world and focus, and then also all the presentations. And so I just broke out my slides into kind of these three areas. So there's the economics of macroalgae, there's the economics of microalgae, and then the blue economy and environment. I'll go through all these slides. I tried my best to consolidate graphs and images that I thought were really helpful, and then also just processing photos too. Again, if you want to stop me, just let me know. Okay, so I was new to even understanding why I was in Iceland and why the Arctic Algae Conference was there. And so these are just kind of the key points of why Iceland is, when you start focusing on algae, Iceland usually comes up. And it's really because of, one, its strategic location. So obviously where it is on the globe allows for it to access a bunch of different markets that it can ship out to. It has very clean and renewable energy that's at very stable rates. So your manufacturing is pretty stable there. And then also an abundance of clean water that is vital in this growing and processing. This is a little blurry, I'm sorry about that, but the left-hand image is just showing you the microalgae on the left, macroalgae on the right, excuse me. And it's showing you like what this seaweed is typically used for. Food is kind of the biggest piece right now. But it's really cool that other things are starting to come out of this seaweed, like pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, fertilizer, all of these really, really nutrient dense products are being able to be derived by seaweed. I didn't know a ton about microalgae going into this, and I walked away thinking that this was a whole new world that I really wanted to learn more about. Obviously, we grow macroalgae in Maine, so sugar kelp primarily, but the microalgae world is really where like pharmaceutical and nutraceutical stuff is coming from. I like this image from the ocean cluster, which the ocean cluster's original location was in Iceland. There is a New England ocean cluster down in Portland too. That's kind of like a sister group with them. But I thought they had a really good framework for just figuring out how to really make a seaweed industry thrive. And one of those things was focusing on high value added products. So though plastic isn't necessarily a high value added product, things like nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals, and even the feed for different animals and biostimulants, those are all examples of you can actually use less kelp but get more value for the product that you are selling at the end of the day. So that's kind of my future vision, and it helps kind of solidify that. This slide's super busy, but I'll try to like locate you. So on the left-hand side, that an Atlantic seaweed harvest, this was really interesting because it was showing me just how much Norway and France actually is able to grow, and this is all in tons. And then it broke it out into France and Iceland, and then just I think the other one is Canada and Iceland, and Canada and Iceland. And so it's really showing you, I wasn't really focused on Norway going into this, but just the pure volume that they're producing there is really interesting. I have some photos in the next couple slides that show you like the scale that they grow at, and it is massive. Like my farm in Kittery is just like 400 feet of line. Theirs are like huge, kind of grid-like structures that use cranes to lift it up out of the water, and then they can harvest it. I'll show you in a minute. I liked too the understanding of, again, like we focus on seaweed right now in Maine as like you eat the seaweed that you grow, but they're really focused in Norway specifically. SINTEF, which is a research institution that I'll show you too. They're really focused on like what can you extract out of this seaweed. So again, they're focused on alginates being one, which they have use cases in pharma and food. So again, high value added areas. And then biostimulants. And biostimulants is just a fancy word, and I'm sure some scientists will correct me, but biostimulants are basically just what can you put in fertilizer to make plants grow more effectively, and also just hold water better and hydrate them. So it's basically fertilizer that can get a better crop yield. And then this little slide shows you the other areas that folks are trying to use seaweed in. So I think I took away from the first day of presentations that like we are just on the precipice of understanding all of the different ways that seaweed can support various industries. And I'm really excited to see how that work continues. I also, let me just move these faces so I can see my table. This is a table that I took from one of the slides, but it shows you a breakdown of all of the different kind of extracts that you can get out of different species of kelp. And then it really did a good job translating that to economic value. So you can get price per unit in USD, and you can understand the volume that you would be able to get out of. So for example, liquid biostimulants, or let's do fucoidin, which is an oncology drug. It's a lot less per like amount that you harvest, but the value is extremely high. And so you can kind of figure out what you would want to focus on. And then it's showing you the total value that you'd be able to derive from focusing on these different extracts that you can get out of the seaweed.
Alexa, could you elaborate on the table a little bit more? I have a couple questions about it. So first is the price per unit. What is the unit?
I think it's kilogram.
Kilogram. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you're saying the volume, is that the volume that's currently in the market, or is it the volume that they are producing in like a certain place?
I think it's the volume in the market. I can triple check that, but I'm pretty sure it's like what's available based
Gotcha.
on what they're extracting in Norway.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so these are the photos I was going to tell you about. Let me move the faces again. Okay, so see on the left-hand side up here, that's like the crane I was talking about. So we have like again, I have a 400-foot, which granted I have an LPA, so it's like the testing version and the small version of what you can get in Maine. But these people had like grids of kelp being farmed, and they were going out on, and this is SINTEF, they were going, it's a research institution, so take that also, but they're going out, lifting that up, harvesting it, and then they were putting it in these huge vats, and then dehydrating it mostly. And so then they were using it for all the different, on that last table, all of the different extraction processes, as well as just selling it as it is too. On the bottom left, there's a harvest machine. You might have seen some of these in Maine, actually, because I think they do harvest rockweed this way, but it goes along and it's basically like combing the beds of the seaweed, pulling it out. And then on the bottom here, you'll see that they actually return the whole hold fast and they throw that back into the ocean. And I think the point they were trying to make here is that they don't completely like scrape the sea floor void of any of the seaweed left. They leave some and are trying to only harvest the most mature plants and then replant what they or throw back what they don't want to waste anything. And then I thought this was super cool too. So on the right hand side, this metal like vat, they're basically trying to show you that by processing for high value extracts like fucoidan, which is that oncology drug that we looked at in the last table, you also have this residual waste stream that you can utilize in different capacities. So like in this example, they're utilizing the alginate that's left behind for fertilizer and feed. So it's this really cool process of you're targeting one extract, but through that process, you're having additional markets that you can satisfy. Maine was represented, which was super cool. I actually didn't know Atlantic Sea Farms was going. So I made a joke that I like flew to Iceland to hang out with people from Maine, which was like kind of funny. But we found each other quickly because we were the only ones that didn't have like, Icelandic accents. But it was cool to just see again, our impact, people really taking Maine seriously on this stage and learning from us too. And I think one of the biggest things that I was struck by was just the statistics around, again, going back to the beginning of why I was really caught kind of the bug of kelp farming. It was around this economic development, but also diversification of our working waterfront. And so I love this slide of just showing, obviously, when people think of Maine, they think of lobster, but then all of the different other species that were involved in the kind of fishing economy and how that's a big sector to be just, designated to lobster and trying to figure out how can we diversify that for stability reasons. Okay, and then the second half of the day was focused on all the like innovation that was happening with the different extraction methods and different processing methods that people were doing with seaweed. And so I spoke in this section about what I just told you guys at the beginning, but there was a lot of different folks there. So for just starting on the left-hand side, there was a biochar research study done through SINTEF that focused on could you utilize basically the seaweed biochar to be able to create fertilizer that would create better crop yields. What was funny was when they first did this, and I'd have to dig up for you what they changed, and it's SINTEF publishes this publicly too, so you guys can look on your own. But this is actually not a good example because it goes from like no biochar is this like decently looking radish to then on the right-hand side, the seaweed biochar too is this little shriveled up piece. So this example of like people think that it'll be used for everything. This was a good example of like, not necessarily. They did adapt the biochar, I think, by adding in different elements, and it ended up creating a better yield, but they had a graph and not an image, so I didn't include it here. Cool. And then the other piece is alginate rich residuals. So this is really similar to what I'm doing, but it's different because of the end application. So again, this is small, but you can look at this after too and zoom in, but on the left-hand side of the circles, there's different pellets. And so what some companies are doing, this one, Bezios, they create basically seaweed extract pellets mixed with other stuff that can be put into extrusion plastic machines and then blown into, in this case, on the right-hand side, the final packaging is like, what you might get something shipped into you, as well as different film applications. Theirs aren't water soluble, and I'm not exactly sure what else they add into the pellets to get them to be able to be heat resistant, but a really good example of matching existing plastic processing, which hopefully means higher adoption. I don't know how it's doing, but that's a cool example. More biochar on the bottom. And then the middle photo of the cucumbers. So this was super cool. It's a company called Maria, down on the bottom in the source thing. That's the company's name. So the cucumber in the middle is actually coated with because you know how when you get English cucumbers that are in the grocery store, they come in the plastic film. So they were trying to see, could they mimic that plastic film through actually an edible coating that they coated with seaweed? And so this vegetable in the middle is coated with their seaweed edible film, and it preserves freshness. I forget the statistic, but like incredibly longer than the existing plastic packaging. So not only do you get the benefits of no plastic touching your food and plastic creation and all of the reasons why you would want to eliminate plastic, there's actually a heavy reason for grocers and food distributors to want to adopt this, because it allows for them to have a higher shelf life of their product. So it was this really good example of like a win-win approach on utilizing a more sustainable option. And then on the right-hand side, something I'd never heard of before, they're actually using seaweed and I forget, the alginate in the seaweed to create basically like mortar that you can use in construction applications. So this guy brought some of his samples, but he's like laying down a pavers and using it as the mortar in the concrete, which super cool. Wouldn't have thought of that.
Alexa, we have
Yeah.
a question about the cucumbers.
Mhm.
So, did they mention if that edible coating has a taste? And I would also expand that to a texture. And is it something that could be like washed off?
Yes, it can be washed off. And so they were saying that their ideal use case is that the users do just wash it off like you would wash any veggie kind of once you come home from the grocery store. But I don't think they said there was a taste. It was really just like a clear coating that they put on the cucumber. But they do, if they had a choice, they'd want you to wash it off.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. So this was now we're moving into like microalgae world. So there was a lot of research done around like species of microalgae, and really the net of what was presented is like we know some, but there's a lot more to learn in this world, not just for me, but for everyone kind of there. One of the use cases that they were seeing really positive momentum in was using microalgae for IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome. And so I linked the kind of hub of all of this research. It's called Algae for IBD. This researcher, Dorit, she focuses on microalgae because of its nutritional value, meaning its vitamins, proteins, lipids, polysaccharides. Again, it's jam-packed with good stuff. Its active compounds, so being anti-inflammatory, anti-pain, prebiotic, has a lot of antioxidants. And there's so many strains of the different microalgae that there's a lot of different kind of nuance in how you can apply them to different symptoms and different illnesses. And so she saw very promising results in utilizing microalgae for treatment of IBS. And that could come in the form of like nutraceuticals or supplements that you would be using. Okay, so World Wildlife Fund spoke. Paul Dobbins spoke here. He used to head up a lot of Atlantic Sea Farms work and now has moved on to World Wildlife Fund, so has a lot of experience in this space. He gave a presentation. These were kind of the two call-ups that I really liked. One on the left-hand side was, so when people think of seaweed cultivation, they typically think of Korea and like that world. And so when they talk about Korea, it's usually about how the volume is so much higher of production, and people would ask why. And they did a lot of research into it's actually about the selective breeding that they are able to drive higher yield. And so, for example, we're growing sugar kelp in Maine. There's reasons for that, but there's probably a lot of experimentation we could do around different species that we could grow. There's regulations and reasons why that might be hard to do, but he was just pointing out that a lot of the yield is actually something as simple as grow a more efficient species in the same amount of space. and you could probably match a lot of the yield that they get. And then on the right hand side, I loved this. I'm a very visual learner, so it was really helpful for me to see. Obviously, I know that beef absorbs a lot of kind of different inputs in order to create the protein that we eat from it. But I loved this because it showed sugar kelp being like a negative of absorbing resources versus salmon or shellfish, salmon, poultry, pork, and beef. And so as you move down, all of their inputs increase. And it's just a great example of, again, obviously the investment initially was in food consumption, and there's good reason why. It's a good source of protein, and it is really like soft on utilizing all of the resources that are typically involved when you're talking about protein development. And as we're continuing to think about a world where food security is a national security problem, this was a really good perspective. And then these are just some fun photos. So we had one extra day there. So we rented a car and just drove around kind of all the different locations. I felt like I was on a different planet half the time. It's a beautiful spot. If people haven't been, really easy to get to, very nice people. And these are just some of the highlights. They also sell a ton of kelp. So I think this was tea. Yeah. And so it's just kind of intertwined into their life, which I thought was really cool. And then they have just really great sights to see. So if you get a chance to go to Iceland, highly recommend. And I think that's it. Oh, this is just the view from the conference. And then that's Paul and Theo from Atlantic Sea Farms and myself after we presented. So yeah, that's it from me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alexa.
Yeah.
Sharing. So if folks attending want to put their questions into the Q&A, I would encourage you to do that. And until we have some questions from the audience, I can just ask you questions.
Okay.
So can the MAIC team. As you guys have questions, feel free to also pop into this conversation as well. But one of my first questions, and you talked about this a little bit, but in the biorefinery process that your company is working on, like what % of the kelp is being used, and of the kind of the excess products, like what are you doing with those products?
Yeah. So this is like, I like geek out about this. So that we actually don't use a ton of it. So only 30% of the biorefined kelp is going into our film. That's not a lot. And it's when I say that to some people, they're like, but what's really cool is our waste stream is we can commercialize that. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can go about commercialize. It's honestly turned into this like second part of the business that I didn't even really imagine at the beginning. Well, I didn't even imagine we'd be biorefining, but the second half of that is right now we're trying to figure out if we can use it just as like a paper alternative in a couple different packaging ways, because we take out most of the alginate, so it becomes pretty fibrous. And can we figure out how to use that in paper settings? We're working with the University of Maine on some like the process development center to try to figure out how we could do that. And then I think there's just the world of right now it goes to commercial composting facilities, which is fine. It's better than throwing it out. But as you can see from this whole presentation, we're taking out one part of the kelp. There's so much stuff that's left behind in that 70% that we're trying to figure out what could be our next kind of use case for it.
Awesome. With the biorefinery process, how difficult would it be to extract additional extracts from the kelp, and would that be an economically viable business model?
You are asking yourself the question I ask myself all the time. So the answer is yes. Like, I think it's economically viable. I think that we are working right now on a scale that is the technical feasibility being lower. And as we kind of move up in the application world, the technical feasibility just gets higher and higher. And so we have to figure out how to do it. And I think it also becomes a just question of how do you get the capital to invest in manufacturing facilities that are doing that. And it's kind of the question that, we're trying to work through. But right now, the scale we're working at is feasible. And I think that there's a path forward to scaling it up, but it's just putting all those pieces together.
That's awesome. So cool.
Yeah.
Do other MAIC team members have questions, or do any audience members? Oh, we have an audience question here first. So Deb wants to know, what is your biggest learning from the conference that you either are applying or would like to apply to your company, Dirigo Sea Farm, and then also to Maine's kelp industry overall?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Yeah. Hi, Deb. My biggest learning was, I was going into this thinking that, so I made a quick comment that I didn't expect to be biorefining. That was not my original plan. So my original plan in this business was like, I'm going to take seaweed and turn it into a laundry pod. And I was so naive and thinking that I didn't think it'd be simple, but I definitely thought it would be, there would be like parts of the puzzle I could put together. And then we backed into biorefining because we realized that there wasn't a way for us to actually get the processed alginate that we need from the kelp in a like cleaner way, not using like harsh chemicals. And so basically my point being, there's no one really doing this biorefining at scale in the ways that we would want it done. There are like the big guys in the world doing like when you go on Amazon, you type in sodium alginate, like you can get that, but it's really just like a couple folks doing it with formaldehyde and bleach and all those elements. And I thought I was going to walk in and like ask this question on like, how do you guys biorefine? And people would have answers and they just like really, they do, or they're in the beginning stages and it's not scaled up. And so that was really interesting to me to learn that this was like a niche, which also made me kind of double down and investing into it because I didn't originally know if I should. And then realizing that no one really had the answer, I was interested in figuring it out. And then the second piece remains kelp industry. I think this idea around how do we increase efficiency of growing? And that could come from a lot of different ways. It could start with just like the licensing process, which I know I'm very new to, so I'm not going to act like I'm a pro in that world, but I think there's some ways that could become more efficient, all the way to like, what are the species that we're growing and how could those be more efficient to ultimately drive down cost for the end buyer like me, so that I can buy it at a rate that then I can still make money when I go to sell the product that I'm utilizing it in. And I'm an extreme version because I'm creating plastic alternatives, which is ultimately cheap. But I think there's a medium world there where you can drive down costs for things like those nutraceutical products, et cetera. So yeah, I think it would be like the efficiency of the growing all the way from like administrative with the leasing to things like species selection.
Yeah, for sure. On the topic of species, really briefly, were a lot of the species that they were farming in Iceland and Norway also kelp species, or did they have red seaweeds as well that they were working on?
Yeah, I think that there were some red species too. I'd have to go back through my notes, and some of these charts have the species listed too that I can share.
Awesome. Kind of similarly to that, and maybe you have it in your notes somewhere, but Annie is wondering, she asked in the chat if if the dulse is a farming sector in Iceland or if it's wild harvested. And
great question. I don't know. I don't remember, but I can check.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, that would be really interesting to kind of see based on the harvest barge that you were showing. That got me thinking about some of the like wild harvest and farmed like collaborations there that might be going on. So that's really cool. So we have a couple more questions coming in. So the next question is, how did you establish your partnership with the University of Maine?
Sure. So the Process Development Center up there is pretty unique in the fact that they actually don't receive any funding through the university. So
Mhm.
they're completely, and sorry if this is, I didn't know this, so I'm just going to share what I learned.
Mhm.
They get their funding through private partnerships. So someone like me, or someone like Dirigo Sea Farm, pays them to utilize all of their equipment and their expertise and their personnel. And so I found out about them through my friend Melissa, who runs Tanbark. She did some work with them up there and introduced me to Colleen, who runs that program. And I had actually applied for a grant that I'm forgetting the name of. I can follow up with what it was after, but
Yeah, sure.
there was a grant that I had applied for that could translate into funding a project with the Process Development Center. And so that's what we did. And again, they're focused on there's two kind of areas. One, how do we refine in a cleaner, more efficient way? We have a way right now, but it's not like in my garage or not very efficient. And so how do we do that
Mhm.
at scale? And then how do we also start testing the film process? And they have our process is pretty similar to paper, and they have a lot of paper processing equipment. So that's how we got involved. Um, yeah, that's basically how it all went down.
Awesome. Very cool. And would you be okay if people watching this webinar reached out to you directly if
Yeah,
they
happy
had,
to.
okay.
Mhm.
Because I wouldn't be surprised if we have a couple people. They'll probably reach out to me first and then I can
Sure.
pass along your information directly.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have another question from the audience. So Dana is wondering, are there skills or capacity missing in Maine in terms of analytical processing or manufacturing, packaging, et cetera? And do we have a complete ecosystem of skills and businesses that are needed to kind of grow this industry?
Yeah. Um, Hi, Dana. Okay, so I think that where do I? This is such a good question, and it's like so kind of meaty that I'm trying to figure out how to start with it. Um, so for example, up at UMaine, there's some folks that have done seaweed projects before, and so we're definitely benefiting from the expertise that they've gained in understanding how seaweed can function in different applications. So that's great. So I think that will continue. We'll just kind of organically continue to aggregate data that then is found in folks working in Maine. That's a win. Um, I think there's also, I say this all the time, but like we're standing on the shoulders of companies like Atlantic Sea Farms that have created an infrastructure of allowing Maine to be the number one producer of farm seaweed in North America. So like without that infrastructure built, then like we wouldn't be able to use the kelp to create other things. So that's a win. I think the processing and packaging, we do have a lot of expertise. I've been really impressed with like, how the folks at UMaine have a lot of experience in the packaging world and in the paper world. So I think that that's pretty great. The one piece that and I haven't totally played out in my head how this works, but I think like being in the private industry or like basically not like I care a lot about IP and my company. That's like how we'll be successful is basically we're commoditizing our IP. And I think figuring out a lot of the expertise in seaweed right now is published publicly, which I totally understand why that needs to happen. But it's this dance that I always do around like how do we collaborate with some of the institutions in Maine that are doing a lot of great research in the seaweed space, but then also I need to think about how that impacts our IP. And so that's, for example, why the University of Maine partnership is really great because I can maintain control of that IP while we're doing some of our experimentation. And so I think it's getting just figuring out how that works. And I know that that's like an age old problem, but right now it's something that sometimes gets us a little hung up. Is that IP piece and how to do that with the people that have a lot of it, like a lot of the micro and macro research expertise under their belt. That
Mhm.
makes sense. I don't know if that,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. One question I have, and maybe this is my knowledge gap, myself, but what is IP?
Intellectual property. So like
Ah, yes, okay. Thank
anything
you.
from like trade secret to patents kind of fall into that world.
Okay, that makes sense. Awesome. Do we have any other audience questions or team questions?
I had one question.
Yeah.
And you might not know the answer to this, but I just saw it and I was interested. You mentioned Fukoiden, Fukoiden
I mean, I
as
say it Fukoiden and I
okay.
don't know. That's how I say it.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's used as an oncology drug, and that sounds fascinating. Do you know any more about it?
I so yes, I know that there's been some trials with utilizing it actually in breast cancer. So I read about that a lot. It's not like a standard of care in any way, and I don't necessarily know the like modalities and how it works in the drug
Mhm.
world. But it I would love to learn more because I'm like also just really fascinated by it. But it was highlighted a lot in that conference, so I think there's probably some stones to be turned over there too.
Got it. So it's more of like an emerging
Yeah,
kind of experimental drug right now.
from what I can
Got it.
tell. Yeah,
Super cool.
yeah,
Thanks.
it is.
Awesome. Other team questions? Mm, okay. I'll give the audience another minute in case anybody else has questions if
Sure.
they want to pop in. Um, but in the meantime, I'm just personally, oh, Annie's got one here. Awesome. Thanks, Annie. She's asking, what are the next steps and challenges for you in your business and this journey?
Yeah. So next steps for us are we're in active pilot stage right now. So we are figuring out we've prototyped this, but how do we scale it up to be able to produce it? Say tens of thousands of pounds of this material to different brand manufacturers. So we're doing that right now. I think we have the capacity to do that right now, which is really exciting. So finalizing how. And then I think I'm on kind of the beginning talks with some smaller brand manufacturers that could actually purchase this material from us. So it's solidifying that, making sure that we're aligned from like a business perspective and that they have a go-to-market strategy, because ultimately we're not creating the finished product. We're creating a material that then they'd purchase to create their finished product. Challenges, it is, I think, probably all the challenges that people normally have when they start a business. It's figuring out how to continue to create runway for our team, both from a funding perspective and additional resource perspective, like machinery we need to acquire, and just constantly kind of going between the future looking state and then zooming back into today. And I think just funding too. It's like figuring out what kind of approach we want to take, and we've pulled forward, I think, what will end up being our pre-seed round faster, just with some of the instability around the grant world right now. And so it's just constantly kind of playing this game of how do we make sure we have enough resources for our team to keep doing the work that they're doing, which I think probably everyone can kind of empathize with. But yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing when you were just talking about how you're working with these different companies who might buy the product that you're creating, that I was wondering about is, so the product you're creating is like this, it's kind of like a product that's then used in other
Yeah.
applications, right? So how do you kind of view like pursuing that style of product for our growing kelp industry in Maine, as opposed, or maybe in collaboration with pursuing markets that are maybe more about like the kelp as the final product? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. So the kelp is the final product, meaning like the processing would just be you harvest, dry it, or don't dry it, and then sell it as a whole harvested product. Is that what
Yeah,
you
so
mean?
I think something where the kelp is maybe more visibly a kelp product. So something that I've seen a lot in some of the kelp markets that we have, and that we've been working a lot on developing is that many of them, it's like they're selling a product that at the end of the day, like looks like kelp.
Mhm.
How is that approach different and similar to what
Mhm.
you're doing, where you're selling a product that if it's not labeled as kelp, people would never know what it is?
Yeah. Um, so this gets into uh, a lot of like the branding and marketing that I'm not going to pretend to be a pro at. I think um, one of the reasons we backed away from making the whole product is twofold. One is we building a brand is really hard and really expensive, and we didn't necessarily want to invest our resources there. And additionally, because it's so hard to do, our reach would ultimately be smaller, and we wanted our reach to be broader. And so those are the two reasons. I think ultimately what we're trying to really focus on is making sure, and what I'm really focused on in identifying those initial brand partners is, do they view marketing the material as a seaweed bioplastic as a high priority? And in order for them to view it as a high priority, they need to get confirmation from the market that consumers would care about that. I think ultimately they have gotten that feedback. I think that there
Yeah.
are enough like seaweed plastics that aren't necessarily in this application, but are doing really cool things, that they've taken the approach of branding it as seaweed. And though it just looks like a clear film,
Mm-hmm.
consumers resonate really well with that. So it becomes a marketing kind of bullet point that they want to highlight and differentiate them from, say, a bioplastic that's sugar derived or anything like that. And so I guess it would just be kind of going back to the point that you did hit on, is it does need to be labeled as that, and not just so that kind of, we get credit and can keep growing the kelp industry. But I
Mm-hmm.
actually think we're back to that consumer point. They do care because there's been so much
Mm-hmm.
great um, consumer awareness driven through like knowledge sharing around what seaweed does for the environment and
Yeah.
for the communities it comes from. And so I think it's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of this like cyclical, you keep creating the content, people keep consuming it, then it can become the
Mm-hmm.
product, and it just keeps
Yeah.
going around.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of both of these approaches are really important,
Yeah,
and they're actually helping support each other in growing the industry.
I think so.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful, actually. Thank you. That was an excellent and very helpful answer to my question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, um, we have a few minutes left. Does anyone else want to ask a question to Alexa? I think I have pestered you long enough.
No, it's
But
great.
what is your favorite? Okay, now I'm gonna pester you again. What is your favorite way to eat seaweed?
I love like kimchi and stuff like that. And so anything that's like pickled or fermented, I
Mhm.
love my seaweed like that. And so I actually got some from Atlantic Sea Farms in the grocery store. That's like I forget the exact like name of it, but I used it like kimchi. It was pretty good.
The sea
Hmm.
chi, probably.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a fun one.
Hmm.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna give people one more second of awkward silence.
Yeah,
But this has
they
been
can email me too. So if
okay.
there's anything that people want to know after, I'm happy to catch up. So
Yeah,
no
absolutely.
pressure.
Oh, well, actually, look at me. I just keep right on going. Do you have lasting, kind of existing partnerships from this conference, that you're building on either with local partners in Maine or abroad?
Yeah, so Atlantic Sea Farms, meeting them there, that was great. Like I had connected with Bree before I went over, but I think meeting them there was great, and I got to meet more of their team. World Wildlife Fund, we're continuing to have conversations with, which is amazing. And then I forget where Oliver is from. I think it's Ocean Rainforest, but
Ocean rainforest in the Faroe
yeah,
Islands.
yeah. He's been great, and I think I've connected with him a couple times. So it was, I think, besides just knowledge sharing, it was such a good example of like, I got to just be in the same room with these people, put a face to names, and move conversations along faster than if I was just like cold emailing them. So yeah.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, this has been fascinating. Clearly, I'm
Good.
very interested in it and have many questions. I really appreciate you taking the time
Yeah.
to chat with us today. And for anyone in the audience, if you'd like to ask some questions directly to Alexa, feel free to reach out to me. Um, you should have my contact info from either when I emailed the recording of this to you, or it's available on the MAIC website as well. Other things to kind of keep in mind going forward, the next MAIC webinar in March will be with Damian Brady talking about changes in the Gulf of Maine. So we'll begin advertising that one in a couple of weeks. And I want to open it up to the MAIC team to see if anyone else had any announcements that they'd like to share. I think I saw some conversation around that. Sydney, you're nodding.
I have announcements, yes. So first of all, we have our next episode of Farmers Make It coming up on March 13th, and this one is all about kelp, so it's very timely to what we were just talking about. So in this kind of mini webinar series that we're doing, it's a live streamed cooking show style, which is super fun. So we have Chef Matt from Atlantic Sea Farms joining us at the Make It Kitchen, along with Ken Sparta of Spartan Sea Farms. And they're going to be cooking up a delicious kelp puttanesca. If you would like to join us, we have the registration and the ingredient list posted on our website. It's all over our social media. And if one of our team members just wants to grab that and put it in the chat, that'd be awesome. It'll be a really good time. It's March 13th, 5 to 6 p.m. Cook along at home from your kitchen. And then the second thing I have to tell everybody is about our farmer funding opportunities. So Alexa just did a great presentation. She was funded through our Farmer to Farmer Exchange program, which is a farmer funding opportunity that is accepting applications right now. So in this program, you can apply for funds to fund your travel to an exchange location of your choice. You do need to seek out a host farm or conference like Alexa went to that will host you. But after that, MEIC pays for your travel and you can go do really awesome professional development experience. And we also have our business and economic research program is also accepting RFAs. So this program is specifically targeted for folks who are looking for getting some target customized market research to identify maybe your new target markets, marketing strategies for aquaculture businesses. And I'll drop the link in the chat for our farmer funding opportunities right here. You can also reach out to me. I'm Sydney, work at MAIC for any more conversations or want to know anything else. We also are just launching a new MEIC mailing list. So if you would like to get all of these announcements that I'm saying in your inbox whenever you want, we have the new mailing list. All this stuff is also posted to our social media, but we also just want to make sure people prefer to have it in their inbox. There's another option. So I think that's all for me, but thanks everybody. This was awesome.
Great.
I think there's one more. I think Deb just put a question. I actually don't know the answer to it, Maya. So if you guys do, go for it.
Yeah, I think Annie Langston is answering that in the chat right now. So
Cool.
I also, as it turns out, don't know the answer to that question, but it is a good one. So all right, I think with that, I'm gonna just say again, thank you so much, Alexa. Thank you for your time. So great to see the work that you're doing. I think there's a lot of excitement around this and it's really amazing. So thank you so much. And have a great rest of your Friday and enjoy the weekend. Hopefully you get out and enjoy some beautiful weather wherever you are. So
Thank you. Bye.
all right, bye everybody.